Hey there, this video is for you if you're sitting your exam in 2025 or 2026 and you're doing the OCR Latin specification. I'm going to focus on the Messalina text. What I say is actually applicable to all set text work, but obviously you're particularly going to want to watch this video if you're studying Messalina. So I decided to make this video because a lot of students really fret about the style questions. They find them incredibly hard, which is quite understandable. But what I want to emphasize is a lot of teachers really overcomplicate this, and that is not a criticism because I've been there and I've done it myself for years. Teachers have a lot of anxiety about pushing students to the upper levels of the mark scheme, and they also have to think about students who are going on to A level. But what that means is they can sometimes overload students with an excessive amount of detail, with an excessive number of technical terms that really aren't needed to perform well at GCSE level. So let me show you what I mean. Key advice for the style questions. Do remember to ignore punctuation. You will have been taught to respond to punctuation in, for example, 20th century poetry in English literature, but punctuation didn't exist in Roman times. It's been added in by later editors, so completely ignore it. Don't talk about it. Whenever a question says refer to the Latin, that means you must quote the Latin, and it's an indicator that you are in a style question. Key advice, keep it focused on individual words. Do not quote long sections, that's not what the examiner wants, and it will take you an excessive amount of time to write out your quotation. Keep it really simple, and do not feel that you have to use technical terms unless you want to. So if your teacher has taught you hyperbaton, litotes, anaphora, anadiplosis, well, brilliant, they're great words. I personally am a huge fan, but you don't need a single one of them to get a really good mark in the exam. You don't need a single one of them to get full marks. As you probably know, in the GCSE exam there will be shorter answer style questions, usually worth 4 marks, and they will indicate to you that you must refer to the Latin. That's a really key indicator that you are in a style question. Remember, that means you must write the Latin down. You must quote it. And the examiner will tell you how many points to make. So for example, in a 4-mark question, he'll say you should make 2 points. Generally speaking, you more or less get a point for picking a sensible bit of the Latin and a point for saying something sensible about it. Now you might then think that that adds up to, in the 8-mark question, just double that. Well, unfortunately, it's not that simple. The 8-mark style questions, the examiner again will tell you to refer to the Latin, and he'll also give you other indicators to make it really clear that this is a style question, which I'll come back to. But he won't tell you how many points he wants you to make, and he won't tell us either. I have been to on various training days with various examiners, including chief examiners, and I have managed to extract one hint from them. And that's this: 4 is not enough. So it is not the case that you simply double your 4-mark question. 4 is not enough. One examiner did let that slip. So I interpret that as being 5 is the minimum. Obviously, if you want to be safe, you can make more than that, but I think 5 as a minimum is actually a good thing to have in your mind. And again, it takes the pressure off. You are under time pressure in the literature exam, so bear that in mind. What I plan to do is look at this example of an 8-marker. I'm going to talk you through the nature of the question, how they've worded it, and why they've done what they've done, and then we're going to answer the question. So notice that the examiner says how, and he makes it really clear by saying you should refer to the Latin and discuss Tacitus's use of language. He couldn't make it clearer that this is a style question, and that's because it's the 8-marker, and you won't get any credit if you're not talking about what they want you to talk about. So they make it really, really clear. Now, what a lot of people don't realise is why these bullet points are there. They're not always there, but they usually are. Actually, they are not an indicator of what the examiner wants you to talk about. That's already been done, the bits that I've highlighted in green. The purpose of the bullet points is to ensure that the candidates cover the entire passage, because that's important. If your answer is to be top band, it must be wide ranging. That means that you make a variety of different types of points and you cover the whole passage. You don't just focus on one line. So Messalina's feelings and actions are covered here in the first half of the passage, and the dilemma faced by Silius is covered here in the second half. So those bullet points are purely there to guide you through the passage. So you can basically forget about them once you realise that. They're there to make sure you've got some stuff from the first half and some stuff from the second half. But what they want you to talk about is the bit in green, how he does it, and you must do that by talking about what he does in Latin. Okay, so let's take a look at the question and how we would actually answer it. And I'm going to try to demonstrate to you what I mean by keeping it simple. There are, at a rough estimate, 30 things I could pick out in this passage, some of them quite high level and complicated. There is, for example, a chiasmus, if your teacher has taught you about those. But I want to demonstrate to you that you don't necessarily need to go complex to get a good mark. So looking at this passage, what would I want to talk through first? Well, I want to go through this in order. This is not an essay. Yeah, I don't have to structure this in a complex way that formulates an argument. I just need to answer the question and I need to cover the whole passage. So go through it in order. I've learnt the translation, so I know that I would translate the beginning as Messalina burned with a new and almost insane love. Oh, Messalina burned. We've got a metaphor. Surely we want to talk about that. So I would say something like, Tacitus uses the metaphor incensa est, brackets, burned, to describe the intensity of Messalina's desires, which highlights the dangerous nature of her passion. That, by the way, is all I need to say. I've quoted the Latin, referred to it, as the examiner says. Notice that I have translated it in brackets afterwards. That's because the examiner is always suspicious that I don't know what it means. So I'm going to tell him, and that's the quickest way to do that. And then I've just made my point. It's a metaphor. Don't even need to use that term if I'd forgotten it. All I would need to say is, well, she's not literally on fire. It describes her passion. That's what a metaphor is. I don't need to unpick in more detail. I don't need to do what I do in English literature. Remember, in English literature, you get a long time to do a long essay. 40 minutes to do an essay. You're expected to unpack in detail. That is not what is required in this question. So I've made my first point, and my second point, I just can't resist talking about this. So, furthermore, her passion is said to be novo, new, suggesting she's done this before, and that Silius is the latest in a long line of lovers, and quasi insano, almost insane, implying that this affair will cause great upset and drama. Well, that's kind of an understatement, but I'm trying to link it to the question by using the word drama. Okay, so I'm in danger of focusing on the first line. Time to move on. I've got to get through the whole passage. So what strikes me next that is simple? I'll tell you. Everybody forgets about superlatives. Superlatives count as a style point, and it's not just meaning and content. So I'm already making a different kind of point here. He uses the superlative pulcherrimum, brackets handsomest, to describe Silius, a further suggestive detail that adds to the excitement of their affair. Just like these days in Hollywood and sport. We're interested in what beautiful people get up to. So that's all relevant. Nice, easy point. Let's move on. Silius's profound awareness of the potential dangers is highlighted by the double negative in neque ... nescius erat, nor was he unaware. In other words, he was very, 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 very aware, and this adds to the excitement. If your teacher has taught you technical terms, that is called a litotes, where you exaggerate through understatement. You don't need to know that. Just notice that this is what Tacitus has done. And then one more really simple point, and then I'm already at 5. His dilemma regarding whether or not to accept Messalina's advances is highlighted in the repetition of see, if. So that's another kind of style point, repetition, incredibly easy to spot. You just go looking for repeated words in the Latin. Again, there are multiple technical terms of different types of repetition, depending on whether the word is at the start of the line or in the middle or at the end. Again, you don't need to know that. Just talk about the fact that the word is repeated and the examiner will credit you for it. So my point is, this has a good chance of being a top band answer. I have made 5 points. They are all valid. I have quoted the Latin. I have told the examiner what it means, and I have linked it to the question, saying something sensible about it. What I hope is to persuade you that you don't have to do anything excessively complicated to be in with a really good chance of getting a respectable mark in the 8 marker. That's my aim, and I really hope I've achieved it. Really hope that video was useful to you and has been perhaps a little bit reassuring that you actually don't have to do anything too complicated in the style questions. If you want to get in touch with me, there is my website on the screen, and I'll see you again whenever I make another video.